Hello again. So here's section 3 of the chemistry chapter, something called polarity and the properties of water. Take a moment to please add this to your learning target list. Okay, it turns out that some molecules in the world are polar, which means they don't share their electrons equally. Water is a great example of this. And then if you look at the diagram, you see that since oxygen is so much larger, and oxygen brought 6 valence electrons to this compound where hydrogen only brought 1 each, then it turns out that oxygen is much more electronegative than the hydrogens. So if the electrons orbit the entire molecule, they spend more time in the oxygen atom. So it turns out that this end of the molecule is slightly negative and this end is slightly positive. So we call it a polar molecule, sometimes a dipolar molecule. You may even hear the word dipole mentioned in chemistry class next year. So this polarity actually causes some other properties of water to happen. One of them is the idea of hydrogen bonding. Hydrogen bonding is a very weak bond between two molecules. It's not the bonds like covalent and ionic that actually hold molecules together, like the atoms in the molecules together, but instead, if you have one water molecule here and one here, there's a slight attraction between them. So it's very much a bond between molecules, and it's weak. So these little dashed lines in this diagram represent hydrogen bonds, and this is what holds water molecules together. Otherwise, if you didn't have water molecules held together, then we'd probably never actually be able to have liquid water because they would never be cohesive. So I said cohesive. It turns out that cohesion is a property of water, and it's when substances are alike and they stick together. So one water molecule is sticking to another water molecule. Those two water molecules are the same thing, so they stick together. And that's caused by polarity. And what causes the water molecules to stick together is the hydrogen bonds. Here's one more, property of water, and it's called surface tension. So water has some surface tension. Mercury has a great deal of surface tension. Basically, it's a resistance to an external force, and it's caused by the cohesiveness of those molecules sticking together. So the stronger that cohesive force is, the stronger the surface tension is. So here's some examples of surface tension in nature. This little bug called a water strider. That's those little bugs that just walk across the water on ponds and puddles. We're going to try this little activity in class, see if you can actually float. You're not really floating, but see if you can rest a paperclip on the surface tension of water. And then, how many drops of water can you actually pile up on a penny? See how the water is kind of bubbling up? That's the surface tension of the molecules holding to each other and the cohesiveness to each other to form this little somewhat sphere of water. Some other properties of water include adhesion. Now this is kind of like opposite of cohesion yet similar, where two water molecules, the same thing, stick together. That's cohesion. When things of different materials stick together, that's adhesion. Well, it turns out that water has both those properties. Water has cohesion, as we already explored, but it also has adhesion. Water sticks to other substances really, really well. The adhesion is a very useful property in plants. When plants pull water from the soil through the roots, it can take it to the very top of the plant. In the case of a tree, that could be hundreds of feet in the air. What the water does is it creeps up the tube. Think of a drinking straw, only a lot smaller in diameter. And water, because it adheres to the sides of the tube, can slowly creep up the tube against gravity and transport water from the bottom of the tree to the top of the tree. Another property of water is that it has a high specific heat, and you can read the definition of specific heat, but it's a chemistry term, and this explains why Um, water doesn't, it takes a long time for water to boil. Water doesn't want to change its temperature. It takes a long time for a pond or a creek to freeze over. You know, a pond's not going to freeze over with one very cold night. It might take 15 or 20 cold nights in a row for the pond to freeze over. It might take 10 minutes or more for a large pot of water to boil just to cook your spaghetti. So the resistance to a change in temperature is kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about specific heat. And water has a very high specific heat. It does not want to change its temperature. So that kind of explores the properties of water. And there's several. And it turns out that water is a great thing to talk about in this case because water makes up all living things. That's it.